Hello and welcome to another episode of Recovery Stories Have Power. My name is Oliver Books. Welcome to my home studio. This is where I talk to a lot of our guests on our audio-only episodes and do all of the back-end editing that is necessary with producing a podcast like this. I've had so many incredible conversations right here in this room, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. Recovery Stories Have Power began at the end of 2023, and after Season 1, we didn't really have a strong direction or goal for 2024. We just knew that this was something that was worth doing, and we knew that there were so many amazing stories out there that we could share with you. This has been an incredible year for the show. We've had the opportunity to talk to just some amazing people, and it has been an absolute privilege to be able to share their stories and the stories of their work with you. And I also want to say thank you so much for listening. It has been an incredible journey bringing Recovery Stories Have Power to you. I don't know what I expected this show to be when we started it in September of 2023. And when I took over as producer in 2024, I, along with the help of my incredible team, kind of hit the ground running. And we were able to turn Recovery Stories Have Power into what it is today. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say we've built something that is really special. I think the folks that we talk to and the stories they present are deeply meaningful, and it's, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to be able to bring those to the world. And so for the last episode of the year, I think what better way to send off 2024 than to put together a short clip show of a couple of my favorite moments. This is not an exhaustive list, and it is not all of the amazing guests. Please, please, please go listen to our back catalog. It is just some of the coolest conversations. If you're interested in recovery, if you're interested in the policy around recovery, the work that goes on behind the scenes that's helping and saving and people and creating community, this is the show for you. I am so unbelievably proud of this podcast, and I am just so honored that I've been able to talk to some just truly incredible people. And I'm also so honored that you've chosen to give us a little bit of your time and attention. I hope it's as fulfilling for you as it is for me to make. And so for our year-end podcast, I thought it would be fun to go through some of the episodes of 2024 and just pick out a few highlights. This is obviously not an exhaustive list. You'll have to go back to our back catalog to get everything there. So without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy this highlight reel of some of my favorite moments from 2024's Recovery Stories Have Power video podcast specials.
And so I arrived there, and I didn't trust anybody. I come from prison, and if you're nice to me, it means you want something from me.
Right.
Right? And they humanized me. They treated me with dignity and respect, and I didn't trust any one of them. You go into and they still persisted in terms of saying, no, you're not that. We don't see you as that person in that box that the system sees you in. You're one of ours, and we love you. Again, I don't trust that.
Sure.
Right? Because I come from a place that doesn't teach you, that if a male hugs you, it means something different.
Sure.
And so when you're in treatment, you're supposed to talk about your feelings. Well, I come from jail. You talk about your feelings, that gets you hurt.
Sure.
if you're in a treatment program, they say, if you see someone using drugs, you have to speak up and say something because that's going to get people in trouble. And I'm not ratting people out.
Speaking up is what gets me in
Yeah,
trouble.
yeah, exactly. What, are you crazy? I'm not going to rat anybody out.
For sure.
If I see anybody doing drugs, I'm going to want to do it with them. Again, it wasn't there for a different reason.
Yeah.
And then I went to group, and they said, talk about your feelings. So they taught me how to be a man, a Puerto Rican man in society, that we are full human beings. They believed in me more than what I believed in myself. Carl Rogers calls that unconditional positive regard. He put it to writing, but that exists within communities.
Yeah.
Mothers believe in us more than what we believe in ourselves. I think that they are the experts in unconditional positive regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Females and mothers, that sort of thing. So they taught me to believe in myself, but they had to believe in me before I could believe in myself. And they had to teach me what it means to be a male in this society.
Sure.
From the correct perspective, not from this perspective of arrogance and machismo and getting over and being proud of things that we should not be proud of. Like I was proud to go to prison.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, they taught me that there's a better way. And they introduced me to this thing called recovery.
Yeah.
Even when I didn't want anything to do with it, right?
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
And so I am forever grateful to those men who taught me that, and who brought my family into that process.
Right.
Because this piece on substance use disorders, what some people call addiction, it impacts the entire family. And what I did impacted my entire family. So I'm grateful for all of those connections, you see?
Yeah.
So when you talk about connections, you make me think about
Yeah.
how I got into that space.
A lot of the negative recovery capital is a result of political determinants of health. And so I don't talk about social determinants of health because that feels very, it feels very much like a way that we blame people for their own conditions.
Sure.
I don't agree with it. I understand that I grew up in a community that was steeped in poverty because there was serious disinvestment in the housing, disinvestment in the educational system, disinvestment in the infrastructure. There was disinvestment in Black people as a whole. They could not attain the same level of employment, whether they had a degree or not, as white people. And so we need to understand the policies that are in place, the systemic racism that is in place, the structural racism that is in place that contributes to the condition of a community and a group of people. And so I don't talk about social determinants of health. I think that political determinants of health is a more appropriate way to understand why a group of people are living in concentrated, similar conditions. And we need to call it what it is. So recovery capital, what I did was I added an additional tenet to the recovery capital framework, which is political capital. So where are the systems supporting the undoing of the negative recovery capital that people are attaining?
Sure.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I'm right there with you. I think
Yeah.
that's massively important because we can't look at every single American, let's just say American, and say, you have the same circumstances politically.
Absolutely not.
That doesn't make sense.
And it's not true.
Right.
Right? I mean, you can just look at the rates of mass incarceration that have happened from the 80s to today, and you look at the racial makeup of the group of people and the age categories of a group of people that were impacted by mass incarceration, and you will not see the same racial numerical breakdowns, right, of the percent of people that were incarcerated. So, I mean, that's just probably one of the more prolific ways that we can take a look at the systemic racism.
Right.
But there are so many nuances that we can point to that tell the story repetitively that there are some political determinants of health that need to be addressed.
Sure.
Yeah, so my uncle, President John F. Kennedy, wrote a book called Profiles in Courage, and he featured 8 U.S. senators and courageous acts that they demonstrated in the way that they conducted themselves in national affairs. But 4 of those 8 had real experience with addiction and mental illness. Daniel Webster, the lead abolitionist in our country, died of cirrhosis of the liver. Sam Houston, first president of Texas and later U.S. senator, was castigated and shamed for being the big drunk. That's how he was called. Lucius Lamar, another senator, saw his father go out in front of the house and take a pistol to his head and take his life. John Quincy Adams, who was the son of John Adams, both presidents, lost his 2 brothers to alcoholism in their 30s. He also lost his oldest son, George Washington Adams, to suicide at 28. I wanted to put that in context because obviously we think these issues are silent now. When my uncle was writing about it, I mean, no one would dare think to talk about anything, but these are an example that these are not new issues. We all know from the beginning of time they have been going on, but it's remarkable that we live in an age where we can finally address and tackle these illnesses that have cut so many people's lives short and meant that so many people have to live lives in quiet desperation and misery. Because now we have treatment, we have data that treatment can work if it's evidence-based and it's the right wraparound treatment. And now we have political advocacy that can help us put pressure on the system to ensure that that treatment is reimbursed.
Yes, absolutely.
Recovery capital is found in our policies. It is found in our social networks. It's found within our individual recovery motivations, our intelligence. Those are all things that we bring to the table when we're talking about recovery capital. And recovery capital has helped to change the narrative a bit, meaning we were dominated by the medical field, but recovery is becoming more validated and accepted among scientific, medical, and even government communities. And so recovery capital kind of, it's different in that there is this focus of strength, right? We were looking at negative drug screens as an outcome. We were looking at reductions in substance use and maybe even remission. But we know with recovery, it's more than the absence of something. It's about the presence of something. It's about the presence of health, the presence of well-being. And by adding recovery capital, the recovery field kind of picking this and adding this, we're changing the narrative on what it means to be in recovery, look like what it's in recovery, and as well as the process by which it's achieved, right? And so it's becoming, as it's becoming more accepted and validated, we're now having a larger framework. It's becoming more strength-based. We're not just looking at what's broken. We're looking at what works. We're not looking at just what is unadaptive, but we're looking at what is adaptive as well. We're moving from just talking about remission to talking about resilience and recovery, right? And more so just even disease versus health. Right. We've added that to the conversation. That's something that this recovery movement and recovery capital has helped to do.
Like he cold called us into recovery advocacy, and through that message, that person connected us with the creator of the Anonymous People, Greg Williams, who connected us with another person, who connected us with another person, and I was kind of very early on in this recovery, just thrusted into the world of recovery advocacy. Yeah. And, it was really just like the opening journey to that moment. And, I think for me, because I had tried so many times, it's the one thing I can pinpoint that was different this time was that I was given permission to openly speak about it. And I saw other people doing it. And, all that excitement, which, from what I've been doing for the last 9 years, all of that excitement was really great in the beginning. But what really thrusted and propelled it was immediately replaced with anger, grief, because in our community, as I was learning that you can openly talk about this stuff, I started to lose friends. And they started to, succumb. They were in the midst of looking for help or in the midst under the care of help. And this small community we had in Pasadena, California, started to lose a person. And it seemed so rapidly. And it was kind of just like that perfect storm of knowing that there's people out there that are doing work like organizations like Faces and Voices of Recovery, and I saw people starting like recovery community organizations, and knowing this was happening, but at the same time living in a community where I was still being told that it was my friend's fault and nobody else had any other responsibility to it. And that really thrusted into like action mode and jumping into advocacy and just learning as much as I can.
On a day-to-day basis, we are trying to engage members of Congress in particular into advancing policy that will end overdose. Now, so this is not just about, traditional harm reduction, naloxone distribution. It goes beyond that. So looking at Medicaid, looking at, other kind of recovery supports. What do people need to get to recovery and to stay in recovery? A lot of what my team works on is actually education, educating members of Congress and their staff, because if you educate folks, then that addresses the stigma that so many people face. And I think that we've been able to do this in some creative ways. We have been really fortunate to host a number of congressional briefings where members can come and their staff can come and learn from people with lived experience. One of the most meaningful events that we've been able to plan for me was we took a group of members of Congress to a jail. So we took a group of members to the Fairfax County Detention Center back in January, talking about giving a voice to the voiceless. People who are incarcerated can't go to their members of Congress. They can't tell their story. So we had to bring members of Congress to them to understand their stories, to hear, the challenges that they go through. And ultimately, we are advocating for greater access to treatment during incarceration and in recovery services afterwards. So what better people to tell their story than those who are currently incarcerated? So we have this kind of startup mentality at the Overdose Prevention Initiative. We are kind of scrappy, and I think that gives us a lot of ability to be creative. There's always an element of what if we brought some members of Congress to jail? Do you think anybody would go? And then we had, a number of folks who joined us. So I think that's what I like about kind of being at a newer organization. We get to be creative. Yeah. And so far, I think that members have been really receptive to hear what we have to say. So it's really exciting.
Thank you again for watching Recovery Stories Have Power or listening on whatever podcast platforms. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us out, and leave a review if you can. I just want to say a deep, deep thank you to all of our guests throughout the year of 2024. And I can't wait to chat with new folks in 2025. We might bring some guests back. A big thank you to the Faces and Voices of Recovery for allowing me to produce this podcast, and a big thank you to you, the listener. It's been a joy to create this. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you know someone who needs to be on the podcast, send me an email. That's podcast@facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. And as always, a big shout out to Chris Tate and our friends at Passenger Recovery for use of the song Come On Home as our intro and outro music. Anyway, I could go on, but maybe that'll have to wait till 2025. Have a happy new year, everybody. Thank you again for listening. Take care of yourselves. Be kind. We'll see you next year.